Pretty good. How are you?
One of my first roles in the church was as a verger. And my wife says I never quit verging. It's like anywhere, anytime. And she'll sometimes turn to me and say, okay, verger. There was a time when we were at a college funeral out at Jacksonville Beach, big Methodist church. And the worship space was here and the reception space was here. And in between there was this set of steel double doors, fire doors probably. And they had one set of the doors open, but not the other. And there's this huge press of people going through. And I was just beside myself. And Ashley looked at me and said, stop verging. It's not your church. So we're going to start as close to on time as possible and try to honor your time tonight. So with that, I'm going to ask Father Lonnie to pray us in.
Do I come up there and do it?
You can, I think Jesus is near you. Wherever you are.
Here we go. Yeah, do we need to use microphones?
She told me I didn't.
Okay, well.
As long as y'all project.
The Lord be with you. That's how it's done, Keith. Let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you for our diocese. We thank you for our region and the surrounding regions. But Lord, most of all, we thank you for your great love for all of us and for our parishes and ministries. And so, Lord, as we prepare our hearts and minds for our upcoming convention, give us wisdom, give us curiosity, give us good preparation, but most of all, give us your grace and your love that we might do your will. All this we pray through Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
As host, I would just like to say cookies and lemonade out there, restroom right there, Keith Dahl right here.
So, and you're comfortable clicking. You're good?
I'm good.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
No problem.
So, what we're going to do tonight is, hopefully it says behind me on the screen behind me, we're going to first look over the agenda for the annual convention portion of our convention. We're going to review the nominations that the nomination committee has put together so well. I'm going to amble through Bob's financial summary. He's done a wonderful job putting together a lot of really interesting facts and figures that I hopefully will not butcher as I share them with you. Then we're going to turn it over to Father Wiley, who's done a wonderful job supporting the Charter and Canons Committee on a lot of outstanding work this year. Then we're going to have some question and answers, and then we're going to adjourn. So that's kind of the map for tonight. Let's go to the annual convention agenda. I'm down on page 5. And if any of you would like to, there is a QR code at the back. Vanna is holding up the QR code. It's also here, yes. If you would like to do this on your own phone, you can follow along. Would you, here, let me just pass it back to you.
Sure.
You so well. So, we're going to commence on Friday the 11th with morning worship led by two of our assisting bishops, Bishop Holcomb and Bishop Sharp. We're going to do all of our call to order business, the opening business that we do at every convention of every type. And then we're going to move immediately to the first item of business, which is the election of the 9th Bishop of the Diocese of Florida. We will proceed apace through that activity, and depending on the number of ballots that occur in the bishop election, we will, after each election, we will pray before each ballot. The process for that, I'm going to take a little quick side trip here. The process for that, just so you're aware, is that the balloting will occur. It is tabulated by clergy and lay orders. And that data is received by the standing committee, by Father Justin as the head of the standing committee. He immediately hands it over to the transition committee, who communicates with the 3 nominees. Those 3 nominees, when they have that data, have the opportunity, if there's no immediate person selected, to either determine that they would like to continue in the election or to step back from the election. So that there will be a little bit of time. For those of you who have not been to an election before, I just want you to be prepared, because that's what a pre-convention meeting is about, is to prepare our clergy and lay delegates for the meeting. So again, going back to the order of things, Father Justin receives it, it goes to the transition committee, it's communicated out to the 3 nominees who are not present. They have an opportunity to determine how they would like to proceed. They have to communicate that back in writing to Father Justin. Okay, so again, that takes just a minute, right? So if you're there, be prepared that it will take a minute. And then when that has all occurred and Father Justin has received communication from the 3 nominees, if there hasn't been an election, Father Justin will announce to the delegates the results of the election. They will be displayed on a big screen. Those of you who've been to convention before, it'll all be very apparent. And then again, as it says, if balloting is continuing, there will be a prayer before the next ballot. So that's the way that whole process will run. When we have elected a bishop, notice I said when we have, please, dear Lord, we will move on to other business. Now, one of the interesting things about the Diocese of Florida and its organization, and there are many, is that our regular rules of order require us to do prayer for mission at every noontime, or as close as the order of business can allow it to noontime. So even if we haven't elected, we will have noonday prayer, as we're used to from the prayer book, and we will have a brief prayer included in that called Prayer for Mission and Ministry. We'll then have lunch. It'll be a lovely barbecue lunch served on the patio, and you may take it back into the nice cool space and eat at your desks, and convention will resume. When we have elected, we will have a pause, a time to kind of catch our breaths. And if there is time allowing in the afternoon, we will move at the discretion of the chair. We will move right on into our regular annual business. And the reason for that is we really appreciate the fact that all of you delegates have taken your Friday and Saturday, and we want to use your time efficiently. We want to honor the quorum that we've obtained. We want to keep rolling. So we will continue through. At the late afternoon, probably can imagine it would be around 5 p.m., we will stop. We will have Eucharist there. Well, actually have a brief pause to set the table and to set the environment. And then we will have Eucharist, and then we will have our dinner, which will be wonderful. And if you've heard anything from the clergy about how great the food was this past week at the clergy meet and greet, it's the same caterer. So good food bodes ahead. Then down on the next screen on page 6, it talks about what happened Saturday. We'll start with morning worship. If we have not elected a bishop, of course, we will continue with that effort. And then we will move into regular annual diocesan business, diocesan elections and resolutions. Again, we'll pause at midday as our rules require. We'll do noonday prayer, mission and ministry. Saturday's lunch is a box lunch, so that if we get done in the morning, you can grab your lunch and head home. But then we also have, of course, the afternoon reserved for our remaining bishop business, and we will have our closing prayer and adjournment. Any questions about the layout of what happens those 2 days? We're good? Great. Okay, I'm now going to jump down to the nominations, and I'm presenting this on behalf of Mother Laura McGivney, who's done a great job as our chair this year. Again, she didn't realize that she's going to have to do double duty, but she's very kindly agreed to do. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run through all of the different offices that are being elected, and then I will go down through each one and talk about all the different nominees for all those different positions. I'm on page 8. We're together? Good. The first position is a diocesan council lay position. There's only one position up this year for diocesan council, and that's just the way that they rotate through and they kind of roll in a rolling order. And this year, it just so happens there's only one position open, and it is diocesan council for a lay position, a 3-year term. Then we will go next to the disciplinary board. There are 2 clergy positions and 2 lay positions. Each of those is a 3-year term. Then as always, there are 2 positions open on standing committee, 1 clergy and 1 lay. Each of those is a 3-year term. And then the Sewanee Board of Trustees clergy position. Now, I'm going to tell you something confusing now, so brace yourself. We got off cycle when we changed in 23 to have our convention in the fall instead of in January. We got off cycle with Sewanee. So we've been kind of adjusting with one another for these 3 or 4 years. And so the person who is elected at this convention will actually not take office to honor Sewanee's timings, will not take office until next fall. And that again is just because we're trying to get back in sync with them. So the folks who are on the trustees now will serve, and the clergy person who's being replaced will serve until their cycle next fall, which is kind of an odd gap that's almost a year. But that's just the way that we're trying to work with Sewanee, because we've been passing each other in the night for 3 or 4 years, and they've just about come after me. So.
But that's why they have a 3-year term?
Pardon?
That's why they have a 3-year term?
They have a 3-year term. Under both our rules and theirs, they have a 3-year term. So their 3-year term, the person who's elected at this convention, their 3-year term will begin in 27 and run to 30. Okay, so Sewanee has a 3-year term, we have a 3-year term, but we got off cycle on our commencement time. So it threw them off, and they've been pretty gracious about it. Now, I'm going to ask that we jump to page 13, because I'm going to describe, as we go through the nominees, I know it's very helpful for me to see a face and to be able to say, oh, sure, I know that person. But I'm going to describe the person you're seeing, and I'm back, if you're in your handheld going through the presentation with me, I'm describing them from page 11, but I'm showing you page 13 so you can put a face with a name. So there are 3 people nominated for diocesan council, lay nominees from the First Coast East region. Kathleen McLean, who's from St. Peter's, Fernandina. John Cooksey, who's from the Episcopal Church of Our Savior. And then there's this person named Laura Ammons. Have you met her? Who is from Redeemer, also in Jacksonville. And those are the 3 nominees for diocesan council lay member. Any questions about that? I'm going to go slowly, because in a minute we're going to see a lot of faces, and I don't want to rush through any of that. Okay, the disciplinary board, I'm going to be reading from page 15, but first we're going to look at page 17. So if you go to page 17, good. There are 3 clergy nominees. The Reverend Catherine Montgomery, who serves at St. Mary's Episcopal Church and Outreach in Jacksonville. She's in First Coast West. The Reverend Sarah Minton, who's at St. Peter's Episcopal Church, Fernandina. She's in First Coast East. And the Reverend Andres Diaz-Dorta, who is at Christ Episcopal Church in Ponte Vedra Beach. He is also in First Coast East, just coincidentally. So those are the 3 clergy nominees for the disciplinary board. Then again, I'm still reading from 15, but we're going to look at page 19, so you can put the face with the name. There are 3 lay nominees for disciplinary board. Matthew Wolf, who's from Episcopal Good Shepherd, First Coast West. Dave Spalding, who's from St. Cyprian, St. Augustine, which is in the River region. And Ernest Driscoll, who's from St. Paul's Federal Point, which also coincidentally is in River region. So those are the three disciplinary lay nominees. And just so you know, a quick pause, so you know what that job is. The disciplinary board is the local administrator, the local body within our diocese that administers Title IV, which is our general convention created church-wide disciplinary mechanism for the clergy. So if a clergy complaint comes in, a complaint against a member of the clergy, it goes through the process. And if it goes far enough into the process that a tribunal or a board action or a group action is required, and not every clergy discipline matter does, or clergy complaint matter does, then within our body, within our diocese, that's when the disciplinary board is engaged. Initially, a lot of the work is among the bishop, the chancellor, and the intake officer who receives the complaint. Okay, so now moving on to the next category, I'm going to be reading from page 21, but I'm going to ask you to look at page 24. There are two clergy nominees for standing committee. Again, every year we elect a clergy member and a lay member. And the last, actually, technically 3.5 or 4, because of when convention fell in 23, standing committees have also been the ecclesiastical authority because we've been without a diocesan bishop. So the clergy nominees this year are the Reverend William Stokes from Santa Fe region at St. James, Lake City, who just became a daddy on Saturday. And the Reverend Thomas Reeder, who is at Christ Episcopal Church in First Coast East, and did not become a daddy on Saturday, that I'm aware. And then there are quite a number of folks who are nominated for the lay position on standing committee. So I'm going to ask that you look at page 26, and I'm going to be reading from 22. So if you've downloaded this and you want to kind of digest some of these names later, you can go to page 22 for the church that each of these folks are from and the region that they're from, okay? So, and you may have noticed that this year, in fairness to the high alphabet folks, we're doing our lists reversed alphabetically. As a D, I think that's awful.
And as an A.
Anyway, so starting with Jack Tull. Jack is a member of Christ Episcopal Church. He actually worships often at the location in Volcano Beach. That's First Coast East region. Ann Seraphin, who's from Holy Trinity, Gainesville. Which is in the Santa Fe region. Jim Salter, who's also from Holy Trinity in the Santa Fe region. Jennifer Lassaire, who's from St. Peter's, Fernandina Beach in the First Coast East region. Carolyn Goslin, who many of you might know, is a member of St. John's and has been doing a lot of work on the transition committee. She's from the Appalachia region. Julie Davis, who's from Episcopal Church of the Good Shepherd in Jacksonville, which is First Coast West region. Ed David, who is at St. Francis in the Field Episcopal Church in Ponte Vedra. The Nocatee development, and if you're not super familiar with how the nomenclature has begun to work in the Jacksonville area, the Nocatee development west of the Intracoastal now calls itself Ponte Vedra, whereas east of the Intercoastal is Ponte Vedra Beach. So Ed Davi is at St. Francis, which is in Ponte Vedra, which is the First Coast East region. Simon Banks, who is from St. Thomas and Palm Coast, which is the River region. And then Paul Arrington, who's at St. John's Cathedral, First Coast West. Now that's a lot of information. Any questions about that?
They have to win by a certain margin?
Yes, they do. And we will, as you can imagine with this number of nominees, we will go through runoffs. There are rules that in our rules of order that provide for 3 rounds. The chair can expand that. And with this number, of candidates, it's entirely possible that the chair might expand beyond just 3 rounds. But we do have a rule in our rules of order that provides, if I remember, Father Wiley, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but I believe that you have to receive at least 25% to go into the next round. So after the first round of balloting, if there's not a clear majority in any of our candidates, we'll take everybody who's above 25% and go to the next round. That's a great question, thank you.
And how many are you electing?
One of each. So we looked at the clergy nominees, for which there are 2, and we looked at the lay nominees, for which there are 9. Yes, I was going by memory, which got washed out with all the rain I just went through on I-10. So there are 9, which tells us that it's likely that we'll go through a couple of rounds of balloting. Not necessarily, but it's entirely possible. Because in the standing committee, we're only electing 1 of each. Let's see. So the next is the Suwannee Board of Trustees. I'm reading from page 28, and I'm going to ask you to look at the slide on page 30. There are 3 nominees for the position of clergy on the Suwannee Board of Trustees. As I mentioned earlier, to get in sync with Suwannee, let me back up. It is typically the rule that a person elected at convention is seated in a position immediately upon election or at the conclusion of convention. So typically, under our rules, the Suwannee trustee would go in place immediately. But again, in order to work more closely with Suwannee, we've agreed that the person will actually wait and follow their terms and will take office next fall. I believe their rule is September 1st. I'm not positive. So anyway, the 3 nominees for the clergy.
I'm sorry, Keith.
Sure,
Can you
jump
get
in.
that off the screen so we can see that?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Apologies.
No worries. You're doing great.
Thank you.
When you're in the role of lovely projectionist, you're lovely. It's a job description, lovely projectionist. So, and thank you for doing that for me.
Of course.
Because I would have ended up here fumbling. So the 3 nominees are the Reverend Roy Tuff from Holy Trinity in the Santa Fe region in Gainesville, the Reverend Victor Haley, St. Paul's by the Sea in Jacksonville Beach, First Coast East, and the Reverend Christopher Dell, who is at Episcopal Church of the Good Shepherd and is also, I believe is still also assistant chaplain at the Episcopal School of Jacksonville. So Chris wears 2 hats. I just want to take a quick aside, and speaking of hats, one of my hats is that in addition to being technically the chief operating officer, which means I work for the ladies in the office, I'm also the diocesan transition minister. So I had the pleasure of working with Father Roy and Father Vic as they came from away, so to speak, to come into our diocese. And I just find such delight that here within the first few years of their time in our diocese, they each are nominated for a position, and I just think that's fabulous. Father Vic also worked with Father Wiley and Amy on the Constitution and Canons Committee. So I just love to see our new clergy jumping into the life of the diocese. Okay.
Do you have to be an alumni to have this position?
No, you don't, actually. You do not. And I don't know, Chris went to seminary there, didn't he?
And so did Roy.
Roy did? Oh, see, I didn't know that. Okay. So now we're going to jump in the financials, and I apologize from the beginning and throughout. Because I'm going to give you my best summary of where I think Bob was going to present tonight. He could not present because there's a meeting at Church of Our Savior, where he is also the treasurer. He does 2 treasuries for his sins. And he could not be here with us tonight. He will be at the cathedral tomorrow night, which is also being recorded. So if you'd like to hear what Bob really meant to say, feel free to watch for the recording of that, and you'll hear how Bob would present this, but I'm going to give it my best shot. I also am going to put on my glasses. The numbers are not that small, but they're small enough. And I'll let you know when I want to move from screen to screen. Lovely projectionist. Okay, so we're going to start with 32, page 32, which is not yet audited, but is for the complete year of 2025. What you can see there again on page 32, you can see the actual expense, the actual revenue, the actual operating bottom line, the non-operating revenue, and the overall bottom line. And let me explain each of those, because this is an area that Bob has really worked hard to help us focus. When we speak of operating revenue, by and large, probably 95 or greater percent of our operating revenue are the pledges and offerings from our congregations. So every year we send out information to those congregations. We say, hey, here's what we understood your revenue was at the last available, which is often 2 years ago. We have historically asked a 10% gift. Please pledge. And the congregations pledge. Very often they pledge at 10%. They pledge working toward 10%, or they say, we're in a really tough way right now. We can't pledge 10%. Here's what we can pledge. The budget committee reviews all of those and builds the budget off of what we hear back from our congregations. So when we say operating revenue, that's almost all of what we mean. Now, there are some other interesting revenues that we have. We, of course, have some revenue that pours over in what I would call regular return. Bob is a big believer in documenting regular return on investments. We also have, believe it or not, really great revenue down the street over here at Ruge Hall or adjacent to the FSU campus. Jacob has done a wonderful job of running that parking lot, and we have just about enough revenue there to fund that ministry, which is wonderful. So that's what we speak of when we speak of operating revenue. Operating expense is all the expense of the diocese. So staff, contributions to missions, every expense of the diocese is in operating expense. Now, Camp Weed is not in that expense. It is in a separate budget, which was published for the first time last year. One of the standing committee's goals as it became ecclesiastical authority was to remove some of the question about Camp Weed finances. And we've been working hard over the last years to really impose some financial strictures there and to communicate that, and that will continue. And for the first time, for the 26 budget, Camp Weed was, as it should be, shown as a ministry line item. Interestingly, it had never been shown as a ministry line item. So in the 26 budget, it became one, and it receives an allocation just like Grace Mission or St. Mary's or the Hispanic Mission or any of our collegiate missions. So that's where that is. Now, I'm just going down the list. I'm sorry to belabor this, but I want you to know what you're seeing as you see it. The operating bottom line, which is again an area that Bob has really brought focus to, is the difference between what our regular revenue that I've described and all of our expenses, how those two net out. And historically, and it's, as Bob will say, it's not a good history, but it's a history. We have supplemented our operating bottom line with non-operating revenue. And I'll talk more about the sources of that operating revenue in a little bit. But just kind of put a pin in that for right now. And currently, and I will tease you by telling you that currently, and in the current discipline, financial discipline of the diocese, the only source of non-operating revenue is the diocesan endowment. We had not been careful enough historically on where we received non-operating revenue. For example, we used too many years, we used Nehemiah Fund funding as well, which was not appropriate. And I'll talk more about all those different categories of funds in just a minute. So the overall bottom line, again, working through Bob's analysis, whether it's actual budget or a variance, is operating revenue less operating expense, which has created a negative, and then how non-operating revenue offset that, and where compared either actual or budget we landed. So you can see going to the middle right here, the middle column, which is helpful, that's how the budget for 2025 read. It anticipated that we would have 2.5 million of operating revenue, 3.23 of operating expense, that we would need $727,000 from our investments, and we would have roughly a balanced bottom line. We never are so overly precise in adjusting the various budget categories that we try to hit exact zero, but we get as close to zero in budgeting as we can. Now, the good news is that we exceeded, in 2025, we exceeded operating revenue. We had more operating revenue than we expected by an amount of $280,000, which is great. Unfortunately, we also had more operating expense, but we had less more with operating expense. So we still came out better for our operating bottom line than we expected. We beat our operating bottom line by $110,000. And again, this is the line I'm on now. So you can see where we beat what we expected. Okay? Now, moving on, which caused us, therefore, yay, to use less of our investment income. So instead of using $727,000, we used $675,000. Still a lot, still too much, but we didn't use as much as we expected. And that brings us down to the overall bottom lines for 2025. Now that's a lot of data and a lot of information and a lot of facts and figures that I've just thrown at you. I want to pause there before we move into 2026 to see if just overall you have any questions about all those calculations. And again, I want to say that Bob did a great job of putting this together, along with Nella Kastioff, our controller's help. These numbers are not super precise. You can see they're not to the penny, but Bob believed that this was a representative estimation or rounding area to give you kind of a concept of where we were for 2025. Any questions about 2025? Okay, you're either asleep or I'm going to.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
The non-operating revenue,
Yes, ma'am.
are we dipping into principal to continue to pull such large amounts from the fund?
Yes, and I'll go to, there's a lot on investment down and a little bit further in the report.
Okay,
So, but hang on that question.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go on down to page 33. This is through July 31st, which is the closest we can come to have a month closed out, given how early, or actually that we're still in August. I'm already in September. That we're still in August. We can't do any better than the prior month. And this is what will be reported at convention, because even 10 or 11 days into convention, it's too close on the prior month for us to report on August. So this is the data that you will see at convention. So we're on 2026 now through July 31st. Remember the different categories that I talked about: operating revenue, operating expense, operating bottom line, non-operating revenue, and bottom line. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go down the column to see where we are year to date, and so you can also see in the far column what the whole year's budget is. Okay, so operating revenue year to date, $180,000. Put the glasses back on, Keith. I'm sorry, $180,000 to the positive. We have received $180,000 more revenue at this point in the year than we expected. That augurs well. Things, particularly during the summer, slow down. Church treasurers go on vacation. The parishioners go on vacation. So sometimes churches say, you know that pledge, we're going to be catching up in the fall. And that's fine. That's great. We understand that periods happen like that. The bad news, if there is bad news, is that our operating expense cycle has been faster than we expected to this point in the year. We have actually experienced $2.21 million in expense on an expected budget through this point in the year of $2.1 million. So we're $110,000 higher than we expected. Excuse me. And there's lots of reasons for that. One of the biggest reasons, honestly, which I am, is our audit. Our audit is exceedingly expensive. I'm about to tell you in a minute, so spoiler alert, that we have just concluded the 2024 audit. It has taken us almost 9 months. And it has cost us, and these are just bills received through today, because I actually double-checked the number on my way over. I had one of our wonderful folks in our finance group, and there are only 2. I had Linda tell me, what we paid this year for the 2024 audit. We have paid $187,000 this far this year for our 2024 audit, which should tell you that our auditors are scrubbing it well. They're digging deep, they're looking hard, and the good news is, again, spoiler alert, that just as we have been in recent years, everything's great. Everything is exactly as it should be in our finances. So that's one of the main reasons that this number is at variance, a negative variance right now. So our operating bottom line, netting all of that, good news again, is still positive. We're $70,000 ahead of the game at this point in the year. And one of the reasons, let me go on to the next thing. Also, I'm going to go over to the far right side. So in creating the 2026 budget, the Budget Committee and Diocesan Council approved the use of $610,000 of our investment income for this annual budget. The good news is we are well under using that for this point in the year, and we expect to continue to be. As you may remember, we didn't use as much in 2025 as we expected to use, but we're doing even better at this point in this year than we were at this point in last year. And one of the reasons for that, I will tell you point blank, is that we brought Camp Weed out of the darkness and we put it in as a line item, and it is what it is. So this is one of my favorite numbers in the whole show is that number, because we are beating our use of the investment income this year, which is a priority for all of us on the team. So anyway, so the overall bottom line at this point in the year, we are $365,000 to the negative as compared to where we expected to be, which was $295 to the negative. So we're at a more negative point than we expected to be in the year. But the good news is, again, we've used less of our investment income, even though we're $70,000 to the negative at this point. Again, a lot of facts and figures, but again, I am an optimist. I'm a realist, but an optimist, and I will tell you that I take great encouragement from where we are in our budget. Any questions? Okay. Now, let's go down to page 34, and this begins to answer the question about some of the investment balances. And it also is an opportunity for y'all to learn more about the different resources of the diocese. We have 2 primary investment funds, and I'll talk more about the former foundation in a minute. But We have the endowment, which are funds that are received by the diocese. Some of them are designated for particular uses, some are not. We were very blessed in the second quarter of the year to receive a very substantial endowment from Jacksonville, a very faithful member of the cathedral, Joni Stein Newton, who passed away and left the diocese a sizable amount of money, and she did not restrict it. So that's actually one of the reasons that you see a bump to the positive in the 2026 to date, and that's as of June 30th. So that's a month behind, and that's just because we should have our report from our investment advisors. So this schedule, this sheet may update before convention. But one of the reasons, in addition to the very positive market forces, is that Ms. Newton's gift to the diocese. So that's what the endowment is. And that's now where if we continue as we have to use investment income to supplement our and fund our annual budget, that's the account it comes from. Now, let me talk just a minute before I take any questions about the Nehemiah Fund. And one of the reasons I want to talk about it is because you do see a substantial reduction in it. And I want, not placating you, but I want you to understand why that there's a substantial reduction in the Nehemiah Fund. It's not that that's a fund that made bad investments. It's a fund that's being plowed back into the congregations of our diocese. So the Nehemiah Fund was initially funded probably beginning, I think about 12 to 14 years ago. Doesn't that sound right? As we had some churches closed and some properties sold. And the real purpose of the Nehemiah Fund is to plow back into congregations that need support. We have congregations that receive grants. We have congregations that receive loans. The historic practice of the diocese has been for those loans to be non-interest bearing. So they're repaid, typically, depending on the size of them, over a period of 3 to 5 years. We've recently had a wonderful experience of one of our congregations. I'm going to go ahead and embarrass them and praise them publicly. St. Mark's Palatka had a Nehemiah loan that it prepaid by over a year, which was fantastic. They had good success in their missions and ministry, and they had a $50,000 loan, and they repaid it all already this year. They actually had, if I remember correctly, 3 more years to pay it, but they've already paid it, which is a wonderful discipline. So the reason you see this number in the change in Nehemiah when we've had positive market forces is that the funds are dispersed. I would estimate, just swagging it, off of that $737,000, probably at least $650,000 of that is loan. So what that means is this is not gone money. This is money that's been plowed out into our congregations, loaned to them for the work that they're doing to further their ministries, and will come back into this fund over time. Again, typically, the loans are 3 to 5 years. They're not interest bearing. Actually, one of our loans, very interesting fact pattern. Sorry, I'm a recovering real estate lawyer. One of the interesting things is that one of our congregations came to us and they were trying to move forward with a very exciting new mission outreach. And they were doing financing to do that. And their new bank wanted a loan with their old bank out of the way before they made the new loan. And so they said to us, look, we've got to get this out of the way. If you'll loan us the money, we'll pay you the same interest we were paying our first bank. So actually, one of those loans, which is a substantial portion of that, is actually bearing interest at the same rate that they were paying their former bank. So there are lots of different creativity in this. It's very well overseen by both the finance committee and all of the grants and loans from the Nehemiah fund have to go through diocesan council. And we've got members in the room who can tell you that they're carefully scrutinized. So that's why that number is negative. Okay. Now, I'm going to talk in a minute more about the foundation because Bob does a really nice job of the foundation in just a couple of slides. But just to hold this number as being the balance we still have on hand. And I'll come back to that in a minute. Let's go on to page 35. So, Bob wants to be clear with you that our investment balances overall have dropped by 5.6%. Now, Keith the Optimist reads that and said, great, we've still got 94.4. So that's just the way that Bob and I see the world. And we have a wonderful working relationship. And I'm so grateful for that man and all that he's done to, again, increase the financial discipline of the diocese. He talks through here, I'm going to try to get a little bit more out of the way, about what the reasons are for the reduction or for the state of the investment accounts. One is the drop shows the support for diocesan operations over this whole period. It shows loans, which he thinks of from his finance world as internal loans because our congregations are effectively units of ourselves. So again, I actually swagged that low. He said it's over 700,000 in loans, and he shows our investment returns over the recent years. Again, great facts and figures for you to refer to. Let's go to the next slide, 36. And this is one that Bob really wants to be clear. Again, coming from his background as a chief financial officer and as a person involved in finance in the real estate industry, he always wants the diocese to understand that we do technically have debt. We guarantee, I'm sorry, I'm in the way again. We guarantee $7.2 million of our congregation's loans. That's for 3 churches. I couldn't remember if it was 2 or 3. I think those are primarily related to major expansions, like, for example, Trinity Parish, St. Augustine, built a second campus, which has been wildly successful, but the diocese, as the owner of the dirt, because we own the dirt where the expansion is, guaranteed that loan. So we have guarantees on those mortgages. The payment obligation is the different congregations, but the diocese as landowner has to guarantee them. Typically, those are 1 to 3 years. Again, the churches are responsible for paying them. The diocese does not come out of pocket. And we have more. This is actually what we show on our financial statements as our assets. We have much more real estate than $20 million, but that's what we show conservatively. So again, he wants you to primarily know that we do have debt, but it's primarily as a guarantor. That's the only debt of the diocese externally, okay? And y'all stop me as we go along. I know I'm throwing a lot at you. Okay, let's go on down to page 37. And 37 and 38, if you want to refer back to those pages later, are really the story of the Episcopal Foundation. I'm going to go off screen here just a minute and give you a little bit of context. The Episcopal Foundation has existed since the 1990s. I think it may even have been created, what would have been created if it was the 1990s, under the administration of Bishop Jekyll. It kind of loped along until about 12 to 14 years ago. And John Howard, as bishop, came in and decided, really kind of coincident with the 175th anniversary of the diocese, as we were leading up to that, to identify various mission priorities and funding priorities that he wanted to seek support for. And we had a development officer at the time, and there was a very concentrated development campaign. And most of those areas before he retired had been accomplished. So at the at the beginning of the time that the standing committee began to serve as ecclesiastical authority, and the foundation really found itself responsible for itself. John Howard had been so involved with the foundation that he really kind of directed where those funds went and into the priorities that he wanted. But the market forces left the foundation with more funding than he had used. So at the beginning of the administration of the diocese by the standing committees, the foundation had about plus or minus, well, actually, no, there was a year or two of funding where they were supporting both the diocese, I think in 23 and 24, and maybe even into 25, before they began to say, look, we've done our job, we're ready to go. So about this time, or just maybe a couple months before this, last year, they began to think very seriously about going out of business and about taking their funds and handing them to the diocese as their documents required. If they were to dissolve, their funding would go to the diocese. And they began to think about what they wanted to do with the funds they had on hand, which again was about 2.6 million. And Bob talks about this in this kind of bullet here, that at the end of last year, the foundation decided that it would dissolve. It was an independent, related, but independent corporation, and it was within the purview of the trustees, the board of trustees, to decide that they wanted to go out of business. So they did. And what, again, I'm in the wrong place. What Bob summarizes here is what they asked diocesan council to do. So let me explain that for just a minute. The foundation in dissolving technically could not direct the use of its funds. It couldn't say, I'm dissolving and I'm giving this to you and this to you and this to you. It dissolved, its funds handed over to diocesan council, and it made a request. If the foundation board, as it went out of business, made a request to diocesan council on what it wanted those funds to be used for. And as Bob summarizes here, the sum of this number is 2.15. It wanted 2.15 million of its 2.65 million to go to Camp Wheaton Cerveny Conference Center. It wanted $200,000 of its funds to go to Trinity North, the expansion that I mentioned from Trinity Parish St. Augustine. And it wanted the residual, which is currently just a little over $300,000, to go to be plowed into the 4 college ministries, the 2 chapels, the relationship with Jacksonville Campus Ministry, and the ministry through St. Michael and All Angels at FAMU. And that's what it wanted the funds to do. So before I move on to the next screen and tell you where we are now on this, are there any questions about this? Okay, let's go on to the next screen down. So what Bob summarizes here very nicely is what has happened with those funds. To this point, primarily because the Camp and Conference Center Committee used the bulk of the funds for the replacement of the entire roof over all of the conference center and barn hall, which was a mess. A good chunk of that 1.3 million, I think about $900,000, was for that whole area to be roofed. And one of the reasons that was the focus of the Camp and Conference Center Committee is they knew they had issues underneath that. Rooms that had too much moisture, whatever. but, or kind of a number of different issues. But it didn't work to fix the underside until the top was fixed. So their focus was on getting a good solid roof. Now, they again have done such an excellent job of stewarding those resources that they have beaten their budgets across the board, and they have actually, as you may have seen in some of the Dyson Digest monthly, they are actually renovating rooms now. And their goal is to renovate all of the rooms in the main conference center, all of the hotel type rooms, before they stop with the use of the funds. So they've used to this point about 1.3 million. Now, you may remember that there were two pieces to the camping conference center funding. One was for renovation and one was for a reserve. And the goal of the Camping Conference Center Committee is to move the Camping Conference Center to what I call supported sustainability. And what that means is their goal is over a 3 to 5 year period to get the Camping Conference Center where it is largely positive flowing. Now, it's never going to be. It is a ministry. It is an area that will need to be supported always by the diocesan budget. But that amount needs to be a finite amount, and the needs beyond that need to be met by the operations themselves. So that's what this reserve does over a 3 to 5 year period, is to supplement the operating income of the Camping Conference Center. Obviously, in the first year, it was the biggest number. Remember, it was $500,000 total. So half of that went in this year and was needed this year. The Trinity North grant was fully distributed. It was paid immediately. And the $300,000 is being worked, it's actually a little over, as I mentioned, is being worked on for distribution to the 4 college ministries. So that's what, as Bob captions it, I think very appropriately, that's the story of the foundation. That's where the foundation went. That's where its funds went. That's where they are now, how they've been used. Again, they went out of business. They had $2.65 million. They said, here's how we want to use it. Diocesan Council said, okay. After discussion, I assure you. And this is where we are right now, what has happened. $300,000 is on hand here. About $200,000 is on hand there, and about $250,000 is on hand here. So that's where the funds are still. But now they're in the hands of the diocese, being administered by Diocesan Council and by the Camping Conference Center Committee. Again, that's a lot of information. Let's stop there. Any questions about this segment about the foundation? Yes, ma'am.
So on the previous slide, I can't remember, didn't it say there was like $500,000 that was still left?
Can you go back? I think it's 35. No?
30.
It is, no, hang on one second. It's actually 34. That's 36. Go the other
Nope,
way.
we're going the other way.
37.
I think this is the number you're referencing, Mother Rachel. Right. The reason for that is, actually, I think Bob may have not caught it all, because there's about, I'm intimately aware that there's about $200,000 or so of funds available still in the Camp Weed renovation. There's $250 in the Camp Weed reserve, so call that $450. So that number probably should actually be more like $750. But it depends on how Bob picked it up from the data he was looking at. This may just be in Bob's mind, the net in renovation and the net available for the college ministries. I'm not sure where he got that number, but it actually is the money's at this moment still in place to be used from the foundation are plus or minus $200,000 for renovation, $250,000 for reserves, both camp weed money, and then $300,000 for college ministries. So that number may be off a little bit. I'll talk about that. Good catch. Any other questions? Okay, believe it or not, I'm finally coming in. Father Wiley, stretch your muscles. Yes, ma'am.
The foundation, if I recall correctly, had a much higher return on its income during its operating period. Although those people said they had done their job and they were done, are any of them helping us as we move this money? Are they transitioning to the regular finance or
No.
investment committee?
No. The board is gone. They're not involved in our finances. Actually, to your point, during the time, let's look, hang on a quick second. Let's get to the right page. Would you go to, I think it's just a screen down, page 35. Yeah. This is virtually identical to how the foundation performed. The diocese and the foundation have the same investment advisors. And the investment approaches across from when the foundation existed and after it existed and compared to the diocesan investments were virtually identical. So the investment approach to the foundation was identical virtually to the investment approach of the diocese. And the returns were very similar, if not identical. So they did not have a higher return. I will tell you, we were very blessed by the scrutiny of the foundation board because they had some brilliant people involved and would receive, they actually, at John Howard's request, both looked at the returns of the diocese and the returns of the foundation and commented on them at the same time. So even though they weren't in charge, if you will, of the diocesan investments, they would comment on their management, particularly in this window, 23 and 24. At the same time, they were commenting on the foundation investments. So the management was very similar, the returns were very similar. There really was no great difference between the two. But thank you for that question. It's a great question. Okay, so Father Wiley, like I said, stretch, you're almost up. Okay, can we go to page 39 real quickly? Again, these are some of the things that we want to leave you with. One, thanks be to God, the 2024 audit, which has taken much longer than we'd hoped, is done. And Bob points out here that since November 2023, the diocesan team has completed 6 audits in 30 months, which is amazing. It's been tremendously expensive, but particularly when you see Nella at convention, go up and thank her. She has ate, slept, and breathed this and done a great job of it, as has Bob. And we also have, they probably won't be at convention, but I've got to brag on our audit committee. We have a small audit committee led by a gentleman named Tom Paul, who I believe is from the San Jose Church in Jacksonville. And we have just such a fine audit committee. They come in when they're needed. They advocate as appropriate. They push the auditors appropriately, but they're just so wonderfully professional and thorough, and they've given such great service to us, particularly in these last 30 months. The next point to know is that the 2027 budget process has started, and Diocesan Council is actually becoming more directly involved so that they're even more informed earlier, because they're the ones who adopt the budget. The Finance and Investments Committee has developed an investment policy, and they're really doing a great job of interacting with the investment advisors, kind of filling that gap we were just talking about, Lou, where some of those folks who had been trustees have stepped in. They've stepped in to really critique what the investment advisors are doing. I don't know if any of you know Jackie Lunsford from Church of Our Savior, but I am so grateful. And Mark's involved on this committee too, and he can witness this. You don't want to be on the wrong side of a Jackie Lunsford question about investments. That lady is so laser focused on our investments and is doing a wonderful job. And there's even a concept, our diocesan structure, let me back up. Diocesan structures of the various committees and the method of governance from diocese to diocese is far from identical. We actually have a different structure than many dioceses in the way that, for example, our diocesan council is structured, the way that our finance and investment committee and our budget committees are structured, how they're created, where they come from, what their jobs are, who they relate to, all of those things. And there's discussion about rolling those two committees together to put some of the financial aspects more together than they've been historically. So now that I've beaten you to death with all this, I'm going to hand it over to Father Wiley Emmons, who's just done a wonderful job as the scribe and a wonderful leader on the Constitution and Canons Committee, along with your friend and neighbor, Amy Johnson, who's also been amazing. Yes, sir.
To follow up on her question earlier.
Sure.
We had like 38% return over the last 4 years, and yet we're 5% in the whole, in the spending. So we're eating our sweet potatoes is my point there. I think
Yes.
that's her point.
Yes. No, I mean, it's, again, I'm a realist but an optimist. I take that as, aren't we blessed that we've had such great returns that we still have almost exactly the same balance that we had? That's the way I view it. But the short answer is absolutely, you're right. We have lived off our returns. We have supplemented our operating net negative revenue with the returns from our investments. Absolutely. No two questions, which is the point Bob made about overall, and I didn't follow all of his calculus in getting that number, but we have 5.6 less as of the report in investments than we had. Now again, I'm not sure how Bob calculated that. I'm not sure if he calculated in the Nehemiah reduction, which is a reduction immediately, but not over time because it will be returned. So, I don't know where Bob calculates that, but the bottom line of all bottom lines is that yes, we have the practice of using our investment income. And one of the things that our bishop and our leadership going forward will need to do is to scrutinize that and take a better approach going forward. Absolutely. Okay, Father Wiley, I'm going to leave you with the resolutions. And the projections.
Thank you.
You're saying
We're getting everything on the recording, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. I have asked Amy to come co-present with me as your local rep on the Charter and Canons Committee. So thank you, Amy Johnson, for being here too. So, do you need to stretch? Or you want to let's go? All right. So we're going from the reporting piece of the pre-convention meeting to the pieces that you're going to be asked to make decisions on. I know the bishop's election is the thing that we're all excited to vote about, but that's not the only thing we're going to vote about. And so we have fairly significant, as you have seen, if you've looked at the pre-convention documentation and the posted resolutions, we have some fairly significant proposals coming up for revising diocesan canon. And so the first slide we have up, which I am blocking, is actually, I'm going to go over here since most of the time the QR codes are over here. I will momentarily get out of the way. Does this wreck our recording? Am I still in frame?
You're
Good. I'll get out of the way so you can do the QR code, but the relevant text is going to be over here. So I want to, let's keep that up on the screen. And the first thing from, thank you to the Charter and Canons Committee, who's been working on this all year. We were doing, in our work over the last couple of years, what we've realized is there is significant canonical revision that needs to be done. And so this year is a culmination of years of work realizing we had to do this. And so we took the year this year and have been meeting, eventually meeting weekly to make sure we could get this done in time for the convention. And this represents some long overdue general canonical revision that needs to be done. And this represents what we consider some more creative proposals about helping to shape the diocese going forward. Some of it is things that we've learned that we shouldn't have done. Some of it is things that we're proposing that might, as we offer as ideas about the way we might organize and do the business of the convention. And so the first slide we have is, why this, why now? Many people have asked, we're in between bishops. Is that really the time for massive canonical revision? And the answer from the committee is yes, that's absolutely the right time for major canonical revision when you're going through major leadership changes. The last time that the canons were revised at this level was in advance of Bishop Jecko's tenure. And so it has been 30 years since the last time we did major canonical revision. We are always doing canonical revision. It's a living document that convention votes on every year. But that's why you're seeing so much of it this year. Also with the idea that some of this affects governance, the way the diocese is organized, the way the clergy and the bishop and diocesan leadership relate to one another. There's another reason that we would do it at this time, so that no bishop takes it personally. It's not an indication of how we think the relationship's been going, because as of right now, we don't have a relationship. So that's part of the reason we're revising what we're revising when we're revising, or proposing that way. So the idea is we were establishing a long-term plan for comprehensive canonical revision. You'll see things get renumbered, things get reorganized, things are getting moved so that they're easier to find in single places, instead of having the 14 canons that refer to these particular things, and you have to see all of the implications of what you're changing. As people who live in them regularly, we realize there are traps in there if you don't understand or track all of the things that need to be changed. You'll see that when we get to the sortition resolution. There's a lot of places that it has to be touched if you want to do a change that's significant. Learning from past experiences to position ourselves for the future. There is a degree to what the Charter and Canons Committee has done this year that envisions the kind of diocese we want to be, and not the kind of diocese that we are. So there are some forward-looking revisions here, and I can help explain those and take questions on those. And that's on purpose. Some of this is dreaming, and it's an invitation for the convention to dream as well. And when you invite people to dream, sometimes the answer is no, and we understand that. And so we present these for consideration, and we'll get to, when we get to the end, about how you might present these things for consideration. And then lastly is enacting structural and institutional change that can't be perceived as personal. I already covered that with the reason why you would do these massive canonical revisions between episcopacies, right? So this isn't intended to problematize any relationship with a bishop or with leadership of the diocese while that leadership is sitting. So that's why this, why now? Questions on that before we proceed into the resolutions themselves?
I think I would like to mention at this point that we had a 2-hour hearing, which is recorded and on the website, the diocesan website. From that hearing, the committee met and made some changes. So know that, we've been listening this whole time, and we did go back and make some changes. So what we bring you tonight is slightly different than what we presented at that hearing, although I don't think there's substantial changes so much, but we have been listening, and we do realize as a committee that not everything may pass at this point, based on the hearing conversations as well as our own conversations.
Yep.
So catch the recording.
Thank you. Yeah, 2 hours of canonical chat, which is a crazy good time for me. For you, maybe not. But you're welcome to review that. We edited it down, so all the silence has been truncated out. Like we tried to make it as palatable as possible, even if you don't like the taste of canonical soup. So our next slide is the document colors explained. So we got questions about this on the hearing. When we had our hearing, why in the world are the canonical revisions in so many colors? And for some people that was confusing. We wanted to explain what was going on with that. So as you read these proposed changes, there is one massive document that are the proposed changes to the 2025 canons, that if you adopt all of it, it would be how the 2026 canons would read. And they are colored to help you digest everything that's going on in the document. And this is what the colors mean. Anything in dark green is a minor edit. So a lot of times things will get moved, or things will get clarified, or vocabulary will get changed. There are so many direct articles. We had one member of our committee who is allergic to the direct article. So anytime a "the" is marked out, it's green. So we're under the green changes, which is what we call the green resolution. There are not major or significant governance changes. It's changes in vocabulary. It's changes in the placement of the wording in the canons. We wanted to color code these things because historically all of these changes were made in red. And if we presented you an entire document where everything was redlined, it would look like someone just dumped red paint on the canons. And so we're putting these in genre of change so that you can read through them by magnitude and type of change to help you differentiate in your mind. And as we get into the resolutions, you will see as well, they are called the green resolution, the blue resolution, the orange resolution, and a red resolution. So that color scheme is green dark green is a minor edit. Lighter green is any change from the word bishop to ecclesiastical authority. This was taking a cue from changes that have been made in Episcopal church canon over the years, and with our experience right now, that we needed enabling language in the canons for when the standing committee serves as the ecclesiastical authority in the place of a diocesan bishop. There are places in the canon where the word bishop is required. And so you will see that remains bishop. And then there are places where bishop and ecclesiastical authority are interchangeable. That change happens in light green. So anything green, and this is the closest example that I could find from Canon 12 that has everything on one screen, all the colors on one screen. So you'll see bishop to ecclesiastical authority occurs here, and getting struck occurs here. Such other committees as established the diocesan convention seems necessary gets moved down to the bottom here. And so it's green because it hasn't been struck from the canons. It's just been moved to a separate location, which is why it's a minor edit and not a more major edit. Finally, the more substantive changes are in blue. So the move in Canon 12 from 3 to 4 committees of the diocese, moving the common ministry budget into Canon 12, that's a more substantive change. That's not a minor language change, which is why you see that appearing in blue. But the move itself is orange, in that something has been deleted further up in the canon and then moved into this section. Common ministry budget used to be under Canon 11, which is diocesan council, moved into Canon 12, which is committees of the diocese. And so when you see things moved substantially like that, they are orange. And then finally, the red ones. The red ones were the ones that we thought you would really want to talk about. The red ones change the governance structures of the diocese. They change the way that we do business. They delete things entirely from the canons. So anything that makes major substantive change of that nature is in red and are actually differentiated into separate resolutions to mark out, if you're looking for the stuff you might be thinking we would otherwise try to hide, it's all in red, because that's the stuff you would probably want to talk about. We're delighted for you to want to talk about any of it, all of it. But we're trying to highlight it in a way that you can tell what's a thee to a this versus what will change the way the diocesan council works. Because one of those is in green. If thee becomes this, it's in green. If we change the way the clergy representatives on the diocesan council work, that's in red. And to signal to you, this is more substantive change. We hope that helps instead of hurts when it comes to digesting canonical revision. And if we have our way, we're probably going to continue that into the future so that it makes what the proposed revisions a lot more clear for people to understand. That's our main objective. Whether you like it or not, we want you to understand it, right? And not be confused or suspicious about something's going on here that I don't understand. Which is why we have the hearing, which I hope is a new pattern, that we will have hearings so that you can ask all the questions. The hope for the hearing is that we move the debate and concern and discussion pre-convention and don't have the great debate about resolutions on the floor of convention. So we're trying to listen and put these in an acceptable form so that by the time we get to convention, we've already chewed on this a little bit. And we don't have convention floor fights about canonical revision. I would like this to be the boring part of convention, not the exciting part. Let's have the excitement in advance. Yes, sir, it looks like you had a question.
I was a little confused between the substitute blue and the red.
Yes.
So tell me, is the red not supposed to be substantive change as well?
The red is even more substantive change. So the blue are things like minor changes in vocabulary that are not equivalent, or changes in numbers or arrangement. So they are not like anytime canons get renumbered, it's a significant enough change that you need to look at it, that something has changed, but not so significant that there might be controversy over it. We didn't feel like it was controversial to move the common ministry budget into Canon 12, but this is not a minor change in vocabulary. Do you see what I'm after? And then when we get to more substantive changes that change governance or structure or authority, that's all in red. And that was to signal what we thought would be more substantial discussion. So blue is a substantive change, but we didn't consider it in any way controversial. And all of the changes are explained in a written report that we've released, which covers the change of every single canon in the document. There's even a kind of a joke in there, in that one canon, the only thing we changed, it was the Swanee representatives. We literally only changed thee to this. So when we were writing the report, it literally says this canon changes the word thee to this, because we wanted you to know we touched all of them. But in the canon on Swanee Board of Trustees, we changed a thee to a this. So the most minor change in the document. So as we go through, Amy's gonna introduce the resolution, give you the titles, a brief description. We'll tell you, we're gonna talk about an omnibus resolution in a minute. We'll tell you whether or not it's included in that, and then we're gonna take a breath. If anyone has any questions or wants to discuss it, we're gonna take the resolutions in numerical order except number 15, and you're gonna find out why in 1 second. And then from there, we're gonna take them in numerical order, which might be a little confusing the way it relates to the omnibus resolution, but I think we can get through it together. So that's how we're planning to do it. We will do it as briefly or as at whatever length you can tolerate. I got all night. I love talking about it. So we'll begin with resolution number 15, and then to resolution 1, which we call the omnibus resolution. We'll explain that in a minute. 15 came out of the hearing. So
we're going to take this one up first because it will change the operating rules to change it to be a 2/3, from 2/3 to a simple majority to be able to pass the resolutions. We're taking this up first so that all the resolutions following, right, and then all conventions following would follow this change to the canon. Of course, at any point that body feels that it ought to be changed back, that too could happen, right? But for this convention, we are introducing this to change it to a simple majority for at this point forward. So it'll be the first one that we'll take up as a resolution.
And this comes out of last year when we took up a canonical revision. We have electronic voting now, so we called for the vote happened, the result came up. The majority were in favor of adopting the resolution, and everyone went, hooray! And then the parliamentarian went, wait! Canonical revision requires a 2/3 majority, so everyone went, hooray! And then he said that, and everyone went, oh. And so from the hearing, we heard this proposal. They wanted to make it a simple majority for the possibility of changing canon. This also matches the way that the General Convention does canonical revision. There are two documents for the diocese. We are the Charter and Canons Committee. We don't think about charter, one, because nonprofits in Florida aren't required to be chartered anymore. That's an archaic piece of law, but that's why we're called the Charter and Canons Committee. And because the Articles of Reincorporation and Canons Committee is really a bad name. But if we have a constitutional document, it is the Articles of Reincorporation that would be akin to the Constitution of the Episcopal Church. That requires a supermajority and 2 readings of the General Convention to change. Canons are the other document, and that's what we're talking about, that requires a simple majority to change at the General Convention. So someone proposed to do that here as well. That's your first proposal, which will ease all of the rest of the canonical revisions, should you determine to do it. And so it's available to you if you want to make this easier. If you don't, vote no on 15. If you want to make it easier, vote yes on 15. But the reason we put that first is because it will then subsequently affect all other votes on changing the canon. We feel like it's clear, but this is new. This came out of the hearing. Any questions on that? Great. Resolution 1.
Omnibus.
This is the big one.
Yes. So the idea behind the omnibus resolution was to put together all the topics, if you will, all the resolutions that we felt like we probably didn't want to take up one at a time. So it was looking at, and there, you'll see the numbers here, and again, as we go through each resolution, we'll talk about which ones are in the omnibus. Now, with the omnibus, any of them could be removed from the omnibus, so they don't, this is our proposal, to take these up as a group. The body of convention could say, well, not that one, right, or whatever, right? You could pick one out to be taken up individually, but our recommendation as the Charter and Canons Committee is to take these up collectively as a whole, so that way we'll get a bunch of them off and through and hopefully approved, of course we think, right up the front.
So this is done at the General Convention as a consent calendar. A consent calendar at the General Convention puts all of the resolutions in one consent vote, and you vote on the consent calendar, and it passes lots of resolutions all at once. And those are resolutions that no one wants to discuss. We all agree these are things that we should do. It's a way to make the business of the General Convention more efficient. We do not have a consent calendar in our rules of order. So we've proposed this as the closest thing we can get to a consent calendar in the Diocese of Florida's rules of order. And so this is a resolution that would pass these resolutions, but we built it in such a way that if you want to peel them off and talk about them, let's go. But that would lengthen the business of the convention. And as Amy was pointing out, the reason they're 2, 3, 4, 7, 9 is because during the hearing, people have already pulled resolutions out of the omnibus that they want to be taken up individually. We heard discussion that say, we don't want to just pass this, we want convention to discuss it. So you will see, these are the resolutions that are left on the omnibus resolution, and there's a question in the back.
So does it just take one person to say, no, I want to discuss that before we vote on it?
It's in accordance with the rules of a resolution at convention. So delegations from two churches have to work together to pull something off. So it does not take one person. It's in accordance with the rules of proposing a resolution at the convention. It takes two church delegations to pull one of these off. The ones that were pulled off at the hearing, the Charter and Canons Committee pulled them off as we were proposing them, because we heard from y'all that these are ones that we want to discuss. These were ones that had some contention or some disagreement or some desire to refine them. And so we didn't want to leave them as part of the omnibus resolution, because if you pass this, all this gets done at once. And then we only talk about the ones that are off the omnibus resolution.
And so am I understanding those are all kind of the green and light green?
The green resolution, the blue resolution, and some orange resolutions that are removals, but we're about to go through them
We're
one
gonna
by
go through each
one.
one.
But 5, 6, 8, and 11 are things that
The
are
high,
more substantive or controversial.
yes, so the higher the number, the redder it gets. And that was on purpose, so that you can understand it really easily. And resolution 15, that lowers the threshold for passing canonical revision, is a red resolution that changes the governance of the diocese. And that's why it's down at resolution 15. Everything resolution 7 and after, so it's green, blue, orange, everything 7 and after are red, but there was no discussion or controversy with them whatsoever at the hearing. There was no comment on them at the hearing. People were like, yeah, that's fine. And you'll see as we get into them, there are some governance changes that so far have been non-controversial. And so that's why they remain on the omnibus resolution. But as you see, once the resolutions start to get red, we started pulling them off, because there are some substantive changes that people did want discussion about. And here they are. Here we go.
Do we have another question? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I'm kind of news to this. What is the hearing which you're referring, and where has the input come from around the diocese to that hearing?
Yeah, so it was a Zoom hearing we hosted in late July. So we have a resolution deadline as the Charter and Canons Committee to publish the resolutions that we're proposing in time for y'all to be able to read and understand and process them. So we got the resolutions published by the deadline, and then when we did the publication, we announced that we were going to have a hearing because we wanted to have more discussion off the floor of the convention. That was held on Zoom. It was sent out to the convention mailing list, the same list that goes out to clergy and delegates of the convention, the invitation to the Zoom hearing. And we had, I want to say 40, 45 folks on that Zoom hearing. I didn't count all the tiny little boxes, but I had multiple screens of participants. We had a bunch of folks on there with a lot to say. The 2-hour final video does not reflect the whole length of the hearing. But I cut down, the silences and people confused about what we were talking about that wasn't necessary to replay. We got it trimmed down to about 2 hours. But we wanted to solicit your feedback to shape our proposals, to make it more likely that what we present to the convention is what you're looking for. Yes, Keith.
Just real quickly, for y'all to easily find the hearing video that Father Wiley's talking about. In your I think it's one of your most recent reminders that came out from the diocesan office to you as delegates, both clergy and lay delegates. There's a link there to the video that Father Wiley's referencing, and it's also on the convention link to the convention webpage.
Yeah.
If you have any trouble finding it, just call the diocesan office or email us.
It was down at the very bottom of the email. There's a link with a play button on it that'll play the hearing for you.
Right.
And as Amy was just saying, some of these proposals are different than the proposals that we were talking about at the hearing because we've changed them. Hearing the feedback from you, I will point those out as we're going through. This has been changed in this way from what we heard from the hearing. So, resolution, this is the big list of resolutions that are in the omnibus, but we're going to cover them all. And as we cover them in numerical order, which You know, we had to pick an order in which to cover them. We could cover omnibus first and then non-omnibus, but we're gonna cover them in numerical order. And when Amy introduces the resolution, she'll say, this is on the omnibus, or this is not on the omnibus. So you can track which ones are set for bulk passage and which ones you get to discuss. All right, thank you.
All right, so resolution 2 is on the omnibus. And this one is, again, minor corrections, wording fixes, and the ecclesiastical authority updates. We talked about that being the wording change from, instead of bishop all the time, ecclesiastical authority when it can be such. So resolution 2.
And when you look at it on the QR code, you will see it says resolution 2, minor corrections and wording changes along with the adding of ecclesiastical authority language, the green resolution. So if you look at the resolution text itself, it will link you to the full document. Because if we tried to excerpt all of the green changes into the resolution, it would be 30 pages because it covers the entirety of the canons. So it will say all of the green changes referenced in the proposed canons will be approved by this resolution. And so this is the green resolution. So if it's green in the document, it would be applied to the canons by passing resolution 2. All right, good. Resolution 3.
Again, on the omnibus. This is more substantive wording refinements and minor procedural adjustments, but again, on the omnibus.
That's the blue resolution. So again, it links you to the full proposed canons. All of the text in blue will be applied to the canons if you approve this resolution. So the green resolution is number 2, the blue resolution is number 3. And so that if you have objections to the blue changes, then you would want to discuss resolution number 3. If you want to discuss or amend anything in blue in the proposed canons, resolution number 3 is your baby. That's the one that we would need to pull off and discuss if we need to make any changes to it. So green resolution, blue resolution, that's a lot of canonical change in one piece, but not the stuff we think you're worried about. That comes next.
All right, so resolution 4. This again is on the omnibus. As you can see, it updates by merging, consolidating, and clarifying canonical text.
The orange resolution. If it's in orange, it will be applied to the canons if you approve resolution 4, and there are 4 things that are in orange that are enumerated in the resolution, because there were few enough of them that we could start naming them. With the green and the blue, we're like the green stuff and the blue stuff, because there's so much of it. But once you get to orange, there are 4 topics. One is the move of the definition of cure into a new definitions canon 1. So if you look at the canons, you'll see canon 1 has now become the dictionary canon that has a list of definitions. That's a blue resolution. But the movement of cure out of that is a little more than a minor change. So it is orange because it will relocate the definition of cure into the definitions section. It had implications elsewhere in the canons that you will see that we adjusted, but that is part of the orange resolution because it rises above a blue level change, is the best way for me to say that precisely. Number 2 is in the Diocesan Council, section 13 is merged into canon 12. That was relocating the establishment of the Common Ministry Budget Committee. You saw the examples about being relocated into canon 12. So those are 2 things being moved, but not removed. The third change is canon 23 on lay ministry. You know that in the diocese, we have started lay licensure for far more than Eucharistic visitor, right? So we have lay worship leaders. We have lay preachers. We have lay missioners. We have lay evangelists. All of these are lay ministries that are enabled by the Episcopal Church canon that we've started taking advantage of in the Diocese of Florida. An orange change is expanding the old canon that just said of lay readers to include all of the now lay licensure ministries that we're already doing and moving that under the purview of the Commission on Ministry, which is something that is also envisioned by Episcopal Church canon. So we're expanding that canon and moving it under COM, which is responsible for the oversight of ordained and lay and the licensure of lay ministries. The licensing will still come through a mechanism in the bishop's office, but in consultation and conversation with the Commission on Ministry. So that's the third orange change. And then the fourth orange change is on the organization and admission of congregations. We had a massive canon on how to become a parish. We had another massive canon on how to become a mission, and they were virtually the same. And so what we did is we consolidated them under a single canon, and that consolidation is orange, because it substantially moves the canons, merges some vocabulary, and you will see in the definitions section, we refer to worshiping units in the Diocese of Florida as congregations. And so now congregation is a catch-all term for parishes and missions, despite the fact that parishes and missions do have distinct roles and definitions. When we can refer to them together to make the canons cleaner, shorter, easier to read, we use congregations as a catch-all term for parishes and missions. And we merged the canons on how to become a parish, how to become a mission into a single canon, which took a lot of duplication out of the document. That is the last of the orange changes. So that's resolution 4. And you'll see that in orange. And sorry for colorblind folks, I found the best contrast I could do and still have 5 colors. That's why green and light green happened. I was like, I give up, I'm running out of colors. So that's the orange resolutions. Questions about that before we get into the good stuff? All right.
Okay, so 5 is the good stuff. All right, so this one is not on the omnibus. So again, we heard at the hearing, we needed to revise the definition of cure. And so this is the committee's attempt at listening at the hearing. So again, this will be a place where it's different than if you replay the hearing. This will be, you'll hear the conversation about this. This is our changing of it and pulling it out, not being part of the omnibus. Again, this will be talked about individually, right? So not in the omnibus. You see here what we have added to the definition of cure, with participation being vested and the clergy reports as being the way that it's determined. So Father Wellick will add to that.
Yeah. So this is clergy arcane, might be the best way to put it. This is qualifying clergy as delegates of convention. And once we elect a bishop on September 11th, way fewer people are going to care about this. Because the real concern around this has been who gets to vote for bishop. What this does is in the Diocese of Florida, we have an army of retired clergy who help in our churches. There are lots of situations where retired clergy may not want to or may not be permitted to become canonically resident. In other dioceses of the church, if you're canonically resident, you have a vote. If you're not canonically resident, you don't. That's not how Florida does it. And it's not how we've done it. The way we've qualified clergy in addition to canonically resident clergy is non-canonically resident clergy with cure. Well, when we got ready for a bishop's election, people said, okay, what's cure? And the standing committee went round and round in circles.
Nobody could tell them.
Yeah. And we couldn't tell them, right? So standing committee went round and round in circles. We came up with a definition of cure that we passed as a convention into the canons last year in preparation for a bishop election. And then in applying that on the way into a bishop's election, people said your definition of cure needs help. And so we added, at the request of most of the supply clergy of the diocese, to allow supply clergy who serve 12 Eucharists per year to be granted cure. And when we heard at the hearing that we did want to expand it, but we also had ways in which we want to narrow it because the word participation was in there. And people said, does that mean sitting in the pews? And people argued, well, yeah, that could mean sitting in the pews. So we changed it to vested participation. So if you're a cleric wanting to get cure, who's not canonically resident, you can't just come to church and get counted. You actually have to
Do
serve
something.
in the church and get counted. So these are the changes that we heard from the hearing. This is one of the resolutions that the hearing changed. Vested participation, and as reported on the most recent clergy annual reports. If you're clergy, you understand that we all have annual reports. Those reports need to substantiate these numbers so we have something to point at that is an objective standard to say this cleric has cure and thus this cleric has a vote. So thank you for that feedback. Those are the changes to cure. That's read resolution number 1. Yes,
Does it still have a certain number of?
12 per year. That's correct. So it remains 12 per year, but you can do it you can now, if this passes, you can now do it as a supply priest. The participation in the Eucharist must be as a vested clergy person, and it has to be reported to the diocese, right? You can't just call up and say, well, we had a neighborhood Eucharist every month, and yes, as long as that's been reported as part of your annual required clergy reports. So it makes clergy participation in our convention broader than other dioceses, and that's on purpose. So that's our proposal for cure. Questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you. We're trying to listen.
Yeah.
Resolution number 6.
6, another one that is not part of the omnibus. This one we will take up absolutely separately. And from the hearing, I think we will be hearing a lot.
This is the one you heard about on Facebook. Yeah.
This is the resolution that repeals remote participation at conventions. And you can see here, due to high per person monetary and procedural costs, and I believe we'll have some data at convention to be able to talk about that, because again, we anticipate that this one will get quite a bit of conversation. Not part of the omnibus, absolutely a separate resolution to discuss and take up.
Yeah, so if you've been at convention the last couple of years, you understand why we proposed this again. This was the resolution that passed via simple majority last year, and everyone went, hooray! And the parliamentarian went, wait, you need 2/3 to pass that. And there are competing goods about remote participation in convention. In that it allows folks who may not physically be able to get there, especially folks in far-flung places who are eligible to vote. There are clerics from out of state who are canonically resident who will be voting in the bishop's election because they are eligible, because we've enabled their participation via Zoom. Some people think that's terrific. Some people think that's not terrific. And so we are bringing this forward again because of the difficulty and the inability for someone who participates electronically to feel like a full participant of the convention. And the duplication of voting, the ability to allow them to vote, and the duplication of staff required to basically manage one electronic convention and one in-person convention. Is why the committee thought this would be proposed again. And now, for my own sort of a moment of personal privilege, I am looking forward to the work that we're going to continue doing under our new bishop to rebuild unity in the diocese. And I want you to be there for that. I think we need to be there for that. It's why I don't have remote vestry meetings, because there's a difference being together when we're taking up the work of the church. So the committee unanimously proposed this again because we think it's a good idea for us to be together when we're doing the deliberations for the work of the church. And we understand it's problematic for some people's participation, and we would want to see other ways we enable their participation rather than the Zoom option. It was necessary to find a quorum at our last set of bishops' elections 3 years ago, and it was absolutely necessary in the midst of a global pandemic, neither of which are true any longer. With the resolution 15, a little better than half of you can make it true again should we need it. But we feel like it's a ability and a scheme whose time has passed. And we propose that we eliminate it.
And if I can add, this would not take effect until 2027. If this were
Yes.
to pass at a
Right.
convention, the 2026 convention, Zoomers would stay Zooming the whole time.
And the bishop will already
Yeah.
have been elected.
Yeah.
They will already have
So-
had their vote in the bishop's election remotely.
Right.
That's already a thing. That's already gonna happen. God bless you, Keith. He's moving mountains to make sure that's gonna happen on September. Yeah, literally, to see that that happens on September 11th. We're just proposing to not have to do it going forward. Rachel, you had a question?
So we don't have a bishop right now, we've got the standing committee and we've got a great diocesan team.
Yeah.
But it just strikes me, having chaplained last year at the convention and seeing the way people didn't show up on Friday to worship together, they literally showed up for the fun and games of having a debate on the floor. There's a complete lack of vision of this being holy work and of us listening for God. And if we had a bishop, I'd be hoping and maybe asking the bishop to put out some kind of preemptive statement which states, which sets the bar really high for what we're going to do at this convention. And that, the last convention, those people didn't show up on Friday. And it's like, you're a delegate and this is once in a year, maybe you should have let somebody else be a delegate for your church, So that's one thing that I hope that the diocese, the standing committee might put out some kind of pastoral, preemptive, this is not just about coming and arguing about this, this is about us accomplishing the kingdom. So I know that's not your job, but on the other hand, maybe there could be a preemptive statement that goes into all the people, and then, the people who left the next day, as soon as the one important decision had been made, they just got up and left. And you're like, you're completely missing the point.
Thank you for touching another underlying reason why we wanted to do this in the hearing and in the pre-convention meetings, right? We want your feedback. We want to have the discussion early. So it's not, let's come for the drama and the fireworks of the floor debate. I've been at enough general conventions to know that there are some people who were there, literally there, for the drama of the floor debate and the parliamentary machinations and all of that. I'd rather not. But I'd also rather get a lot done, right, at the same time. So we're trying to get it out and give you as much opportunity to discuss it with us ahead of time. Yes?
My only comment is, maybe maybe it's my ignorance of the wider church, but I was shocked to learn during the pilgrimage, the Meat and Greet pilgrimage, that we could wind up being like the Diocese of Southwestern Florida, who has over 275 retired clergy as delegates. And at that point, your clergy is deciding who your bishop is, not your lay delegates. And I think this is very visionary of us to say, if you're a clergy delegate, you gotta at least have some skin in the game and be doing something and be actively involved in the mission and ministry. I think it sets the bar higher for that, and I think that's what's needed so that lay delegates don't feel like there's a them and us mentality, and keeps us kind of all part of one team.
Yeah.
I think that's vitally important, and
Agreed. I've been watching some bishops' elections too and seeing some places where the clergy delegates outnumber the lay.
exactly, that's what I'm saying.
That's alarming.
That is
For me,
crazy.
right?
Yeah.
That's way backwards.
But when you're Florida or you're the Carolinas, that's where everybody wants to retire. And so,
Right.
they're all taking the
Mhm.
heave-ho of that.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments on the Zoom participation? This is not on the omnibus resolution. It was the hot topic. So if you're looking for convention drama, go see the hearing. Look at your unofficial clergy, or unofficial Diocese of Florida Facebook page. There are people talking about it. And let's do the drama there and come and be able to make the decision at the convention. This will be discussed. There are people who want to discuss it on the floor of the convention. It's already been pulled off the omnibus resolution. We heard you. So we'll take this up individually because we are not of one mind about resolution number 6.
Right, so resolution number 7, back to the omnibus. This one is removing assistant officer roles. Again, changing, but the reasoning behind this is that they don't need to be in canon.
That's right.
We can have assistant officers if we need them, it just doesn't need to be named in canon. But it's part of the omnibus because it is not a minor change, it's probably orange.
It's red.
Red, okay.
Because it deletes from the canon entirely. This is assistant treasurers and assistant secretaries. So the treasurer of the diocese and the secretary of the diocese are permitted by canon to appoint assistants who are then titled under the canons as their assistants. And we were talking about unnecessary levels of governance in the canon. And what we decided is that those people can have assistants. They do not need our canonical permission to have assistants. And so this deletes those positions of assistant treasurers and assistant secretaries and doesn't prohibit them from having them, but doesn't specifically enable it in canon. We felt like council, standing committee, bishop, if the treasurer asked for help, would go, yeah, we can get you help. And they don't need canonical establishment to do that. And so minor change, we didn't hear any controversy about it at the hearing, so this is on the omnibus. But it is a red change because it does change the governance of the diocese. There will no longer be an official title of assistant secretary to the diocese if this passes. All right.
Right.
I heard someone yawn. You're not interested in this item. Resolution 8.
8 will be another one when we've already had a lot of conversation at the hearing. This resolution, if it should pass, would mean that some positions, as noted down here at the bottom of the screen, would be filled by sortition instead of election. So sort of casting lots as with a biblical inspiration here. And so it would be sortition instead of election for some positions. So we know there will be lots of conversation around resolution 8.
So this came from the parishes of the people involved on the committees, all select myself included, delegates to the convention, vestry members at our annual parish meetings by drawing names out of a hat. We have pre-qualification, confirmed communicant in good standing. Our nominating committees all pre-qualify these people as capable of doing the job and qualified for the role. We say a prayer, we put the names in a hat and draw them out. Someone proposed that we do that at the convention level, at the diocesan convention level, as a way to avoid any election-related campaigning or politicking, or feeling like we're dividing people into winners and losers. And so this is proposed as a way that we do elections for diocesan positions. And that is the 5 lay diocesan council members, 2 clergy at large diocesan council members, the 1 youth diocesan council member who's presently selected by council and not elected by the convention, and the 9 disciplinary board members and the deputies to general convention. All of these people would be pre-qualified by our nominating committee to be qualified to stand for election and able to perform the duties of the office. They would be announced in advance. And then at convention, we would put them in a hat, say a prayer and draw out the names. This has been another of our controversial proposals.
That's like the ultimate omnibus.
Yeah, but this is not on the omnibus resolution.
Yeah, no,
This
I'm just
is-
saying,
Yeah,
get something done.
yeah. And so we looked at different ways to do this. So we looked at the possibility of having delegates from regions only elected by the people from the regions at the convention. So we would have to subdivide the electronic voting so that First Coast West would vote for the First Coast West representatives and Appalachia would vote for the Appalachia representatives, because you're far more likely to know who the Appalachia representatives are than the full convention are. And we kicked around multiple different proposals, and then one of our members said, I have a really wild idea. Why don't we do it the way that I do it at my parish? And another member of the committee said, well, that's how we do it at my parish. And then I said, well, that's how we do it at my parish. And then he said, well, why aren't we doing it at convention that way? I was like, because they're gonna think we're crazy. And he said, well, let's ask them. So we're asking.
And did anybody say, why don't we do it the way they did it in the Bible?
Yeah, that's exactly why we do it that way in the parish. We reference this scripture in advance of our elections, elections at every annual parish meeting. So yeah, that's the reason why we think reasonable people might do it this way. And reasonable people disagree. So the Charter and Canons Committee proposed this at the hearing, and the hearing said, wow, really? And we got back together and they said, wow, really? Do we want to continue to propose it? And the committee decided together, yes, we do. And if this is not something you're interested in, please vote no. If it's something that you are interested in, you can vote yes, or amend it. These are your resolutions. Yes.
This is instead of just having what we're having this convention, which is where we have the candidates and we just choose.
That's right.
So why did the committee feel like that wasn't working, that system?
Mainly because they're twofold. One is that the whole convention elects regional representation. And so a couple of the members of the committee said, I'm being asked to select from Appalachia region delegates whom I don't know. And I'm working against myself here, but if people who are standing for general diocesan positions are from more populous regions and are known by people in more populous regions, they would be preferred for election. And so this also has the possibility of spreading out the leadership more evenly in the diocese.
It does.
And so that it's not people who are known by more people in places where there are more people. And so this does put the onus on the nominating committee to make sure that we do vet our candidates, right? And it's not somebody who walked into the church 10 minutes ago and has delusions of grandeur, thinks that he or she is going to be the Messiah on the standing committee. But nominating committee will have the important job of vetting and making sure all of these people are qualified and capable of performing the job, but then there will be no election. There will be selection by lot. The fancy legal term for that is sortition. And people are like, why don't you say drawn by lot? And my answer is there are lawyers on the committee who know this stuff and I don't. So they said use sortition, sortition it is. That's the word for drawing names out of a hat. And so that's our proposal.
Did you discuss a slate option at all?
I'm sorry?
Did you discuss a slate option?
What do you mean by slate option?
That the nominating committee would put together a slate and then the slate would just be approved
Oh,
theoretically?
yes, they absolutely could. But the way I like to say it in my parish is I like to give the Holy Spirit options. So this is Wiley at Redeemer, and my vestry, we typically look for 2 times plus 1, right? So it's not a 1-to-1 selection. So if there's one person that needs to be chosen, we like at least 3 names. Ideally, we never want to propose 1 name. But that's so that the leadership doesn't just get accused of picking all their friends, right? That's the shadow side of a slate, where people say, well, there were only 5 people in the diocese who could do those 5 jobs? Really? But the hope is that the drawing by lot takes out, one, the potential population bias, but two, also separating the people have got into winners and losers. Why didn't they want me? I find that works at the parish level. That the parishioners are not weighing in on the relative merits of their fellow parishioners. Yes?
Do you know like what percentage of the parishes are doing this drawing versus electing?
I don't.
I'd just be curious to know because I had never heard of that until this summer.
Oh.
My mother-in-law who is at St. Peter's in Fernandina told me about it.
Yeah.
Never heard of such things, so.
Yeah, I don't know, y'all elect here?
We elect, yes.
You elect, okay. I was gonna say, it wasn't.
Holy Comforter. I can't speak for the other churches.
Yeah, it wasn't every parish on the committee, but it was the majority of parishes on the committee do it that way. So we're proposing it for your consideration.
And I will say that one of the things that came up was, obviously, this resolution is changing that election to selection, right, by law. It's not touching the nominating process, right? That's already in place and would stay in place and would be still done. This is just changing whether we have a ballot, but it's part of the voting that we do, as we saw earlier tonight, or whether it's a sortition.
Yeah, drawn by lot. Yes, sir.
Will we be able to learn about the nomination process, particularly the lay delegates who may not be familiar with that?
Yeah, so we talk about this in the resolution, that it then becomes incumbent on diocesan leadership to announce that ahead of time. What are the positions open? What are the qualifications for standing for selection? And what does the job entail? So that then, and we would need more qualifications than you are upright and have a pulse to stand for election. There would be, this is what it entails, and you need to tell the nominating committee why you would be able to perform the duties assigned to you should you be selected. Keith, looked like you
I
had.
just was gonna add in, because one of my hats is to serve as staff to the standing committee. The ecclesiastical authority, the way we do nominating in the Diocese of Florida is the ecclesiastical authority has to pick 5 and only 5 persons to be on the diocesan nominating committee. It has to be a mixture of lay and clergy. There has to be only one person from each region.
Yep.
So there's one First Coast West, one First Coast East, one Appalachia, one River, one Santa Fe. And those 5 people, a mixture of clergy and lay, go out and fill all the job opening
That are up for election.
Up for election.
Yep. So that's our present nominating process. This canon doesn't change the nominating process, it changes the selection process. And this is another reason why this does state everywhere in the canon that gets touched, this is a 2-page resolution, because 3-page resolution, because everywhere that gets changed, a red resolution, you can see every single thing that has to get touched to enable this to happen. So it will not be on the omnibus because people want to discuss it. They want to discuss it at the hearing. If you want more high drama about people discussing resolutions at convention, tune into the hearing on sortition. We had people on the call who hated it, hated it. So I invite you to watch the hearing. You can hear some of the counter proposals or reasons why they would want to do it otherwise.
Anybody else? No? All right.
Number 9.
Number 9, back to the omnibus.
They get faster.
Yeah.
These are the big ones. As we get down further on the list, they'll be back on the omnibus. They'll be non-controversial. We can go.
So this is removing a redundant requirement for treasurers.
This is a simple section 5 in Canon 7. The treasurer shall be bonded in a sum and with security satisfactory to the diocesan council. We heard this from diocesan staff. Bonding is not the only thing that we have to do to cover our treasurer, and it is included in our existing insurance policies, and so is unnecessary to be called out alone in canon. And so we were asked to remove it, and we were happy to remove it with the idea that this isn't all we do to cover our treasurer. There's more than that, and it's already, this that we would do for our treasurer is already covered by our insurance policies. So this is an old canon that we were asked to eliminate, happy to oblige. Didn't see any controversy, there wasn't any discussion. I do want to be clear that it doesn't mean our treasurer isn't bonded, because people have asked that. It means that it's more complicated than that, and it's covered under our insurance policies. And then I also want to be clear about another thing. We've heard about the resolution on electronic participation, whether or not that eliminates electronic voting. And the answer to that is no. Electronic voting is the best. And we're going to do that forever as far as I'm concerned. But it's just the electronic Zoom participation as a delegate to convention. You're welcome to watch. We want more people to watch convention, but to participate as a delegate, that's what the proposal seeks to eliminate, not electronic voting. Electronic voting will still happen. That's the best. Okay.
Right.
Any questions on that? The bonding of the treasurer. 10.
Again, an omnibus. This one updates, it expands the role for standing committee presidency.
Simple change in the canon on the standing committee. It says the president, who must be a priest, gets struck. And it will make room for the possibility of a lay president of the standing committee of the Diocese of Florida. There are other dioceses who do it. We had it proposed to us. We thought, sure. The possibility of a lay president of the standing committee is nothing we've ever done before. But should the standing committee, who elects their own president, determine that that president should be a lay person, go ahead. That's what this enables. The standing committee has the ability to choose, as their president, a lay person. Yes?
So as you considered this resolution, I think what I find very risky about that is the whole issue. You're just putting something like that. It looks like it's, it's fair. That's fair. We should have, except we don't have a bishop who's a lay person. This is an ecclesiastical authority.
Mm-hmm.
And clergy people who the church has recognized and then anointed, the Lord has anointed them with His Holy Spirit to lead the church.
Mm-hmm.
So, I find that a little risky to just stick up there as a resolution without any, without teaching or consideration of what the deeper implications or dangers in fact could be if you go forward. Did you think about that when you came up with this?
Yeah, and this is one of the questions that people were asking us about, well, what do other dioceses do? It's one that the church is mixed on this. Some dioceses have lay presidents of standing committees, and some dioceses restricted to clergy alone. And so this was from the experience of past standing committees, that the laity on the standing committee were not always full members of the standing committee, because it tended to be the three clergy and the laity when they got asked. And so this was proposed as one of the ways in which we could invite fuller lay participation on the standing committee.
So you're redressing a problem, which is that the laity aren't being given that full participation by giving them a role that actually they're not equipped for because they haven't trained. They might have wisdom, et cetera, but you're making decisions. You wouldn't put a layperson in charge of a parish. Sometimes you have the senior warden who has to run things temporarily. Yes, I understand that, but this is a little bit different.
So respectfully, I would disagree. The standing committee does not celebrate Eucharist. The standing committee ordains no one. And the standing committee as a group has to make decisions that every person on the standing committee has an equal vote in. Part of why this is being proposed is that especially when the standing committee is serving as the ecclesiastical authority of a diocese, the chair of the standing committee is being treated as a proxy bishop, which often happens because that person is a cleric. And so part of the purpose of the resolution would be that you cannot treat a layperson as a proxy bishop in the absence of a bishop when the standing committee is serving as the ecclesiastical authority of the diocese. And that's part of the point. that they actually are qualified because they are co-equal members of a standing committee. There are 6 members of the standing committee, 3 clergy, 3 lay, they all get 1 vote. And the chair is not more special than anyone else on the standing committee. They have to speak as a voice. And so the way in which a presiding bishop is not an archbishop in the church in the United States, the chair of the standing committee convenes the committee and presides at the meeting of the committee, but they are a co-equal member of that, in much in the same way that our presiding bishop is a co-equal member of the House of Bishops. And so that's would be my counter-argument to the idea that laity are not equipped or trained to be members of our standing committee. That would argue for a cleric exclusive standing committee. And I would say that has been the way that we operate, and I disagree that that's the way that we should operate. I hope it's helpful.
Yep, I mean, I
You understand?
don't necessarily take that perspective,
Yeah.
but I completely hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And again, as part of the omnibus, it could be that from the floor 2 parishes come together, because this is part of the omnibus, and could pull this off for separate conversation.
Yes.
Right, back to that
So
original point.
We didn't hear that feedback at the hearing,
Right,
which is why it
because
stayed
that's-
on the omnibus,
right.
but it could be pulled off and discussed. So, any other?
11?
Thank you. Any other, I appreciate that. This is the kind of discussion we hope we're having here. And I hope you're hearing this as why we would propose it and not, I hope you hear this as exclusively why we would propose it. We're on number 10?
11, which is not on the omnibus. This is a separate one. Because this is the one that would change regional canons on the diocesan council to non-voting members. They are
Yes.
currently voting members, the regional canons, as appointed by the ecclesiastical authority. This would remove their voting privileges. They'd still be part of diocesan council, but would remove their voting privileges.
Yeah. So this is another one that we were looking at different ways to arrange diocesan council. And we had a proposal to elect the regional canons by region, either by clergy alone or by clergy and laity. That was one proposal we looked at. We also looked at electing the regional canons by convention, or allowing the bishop to continue to select the regional canons, which is the way it is now. Right now, the bishop chooses the regional canons. Those 5 regional canons sit on council and have 5 votes among the 11 members. Yes, no, 2 at large. I'm trying to count them all. 12 members,
Actually,
13 members of council.
13 with you.
Yeah, so 6 of the 13 votes of council are the bishop or someone whom the bishop has appointed. And so there were questions about if that's the way we wanted to continue, and there are competing aims. The council is also the bishop's, a council of advice for the bishop. So the committee decided that we wanted to preserve the ability for the bishop to appoint the regional canons because they have functions outside of council, like managing communication during a disaster or communication with the clergy of the region. So the clergy, the regional canon can be a bishop's surrogate for communicating and convening the clergy of the region. So we were looking at a way that allowed the bishop, ultimately what we decided on was to permit the bishop to continue to select the regional canons, but not to give the bishop 6 votes on the council. And so this proposal preserves regional canons in the form that they currently are, but then, and they sit on the council in an advisory capacity, but don't vote. And that's where we landed on the compromise. This is not on the omnibus resolution. This will be individually taken up. This is a governance change. Yes.
I gotta tell you, this one is like out of several, and this is my hot button. I find it amazing, number one, that it talks about compensation when the stipend they're given doesn't even come close to covering their mileage that they do in this job. And if we really think that that tiny amount is buying their vote, then we got a much bigger problem than how we're doing the canons, but also that if they are the regional canons who are doing pastoral care for the priests in that area, and then also they are a localized priest in that region, to me, it's like taking away a vote from your region, that you're making them non-voting. Their advice should have weight to it.
Oh, yeah.
And the only way to do that is to give them a vote.
Mm-hmm.
And you're taking that away. And I think we've had enough, schism between our priests for quite some time. And I think changing the position of somebody who's basically the pastoral care, especially while we haven't had a bishop, and even once we do, that you have a mid-level person that's making certain that there is collegial and constant, interaction. Even if you don't agree, you're having to come together and see. Everything about this strikes me as we're going the wrong direction.
So this doesn't eliminate the position of regional canon.
Yeah, just completely changes how it works, it seems.
Okay. I understand. We don't see it that way.
Okay.
So we were trying to balance governance with the governance of the diocese with the frankly a bishop's ability to swap out canons who aren't voting the way that he would want them to vote, which has been done. So there's more implications than just the pastoral care of this section of the diocese. This proposal is written in experience.
Okay.
And so we were working on what it would look like to have canons elected, because then you take out that possibility. But then elected canons wouldn't necessarily constitute an advisory board for the bishop, because then you could elect antagonists, right? You have the opposite effect in that you could put regional canons on the council who are antagonistic to the bishop. We were trying to avoid that. And so this is there are pluses and minuses to every way to do it, and you're identifying some of the minuses in doing it this way. This was ultimately the compromise that we came to, that we felt like had the least amount of drawbacks. And it sounds like you disagree.
I do, and I guess part of it, again, is always my thought that if that's what we have to do to solve a problem, we have a much bigger problem than this solves.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah. And
we're
so,
trying to solve the problems we can.
Okay.
Those other problems are not something the Charter and Canons Committee can fix.
Okay.
Question in the back?
If the regional canon is a priest, that's disenfranchising.
Yeah,
Because they already have a vote in council.
they remain a delegate to the convention. This is specifically on diocesan council. It would disenfranchise a regional canon with respect to the way the council is constructed today on diocesan council. Yes. So the priest would be there and participate in council meetings, get the council information, participate in the council discussion. But then when the council went to vote, it would not be 12 people voting, it would be 7. 5 of which, who are your lay delegates from each of your regions. So regional representation is maintained, but there's a compromise with the clergy leadership on council. Does that help answer the question?
I'm not quite sure there, so the priest would be a delegate that would not have a vote.
The priest would remain a delegate to the convention. So convention and council And there's some confusion in this, in that some dioceses call their annual gathering a council. We do not. Diocesan council is a subset of the leadership of the diocese that is a parallel body to the standing committee. So this only affects the convention out of session, which for us is what we call council.
I understand. I was conflating diocesan council and convention.
Okay.
That's what-
Thanks. Yeah, I thought that might be what was going on. Yep. Any others on that? Next resolution.
All right.
Number 12.
12, back to omnibus. All right, this one clarifies that the diocesan council is responsible for compensation. Clarification.
So already in the canons, the diocesan council is responsible for the creation of any diocesan staff position and that position's compensation, excluding the bishops. Right now, the bishop's compensation is set by the convention at the bishop's election, and then subsequently by two people of the diocese, which is the vice chair of the diocesan council, who is a layperson, and the chair of the finance, and investment committee. So convention sets compensation, and as part of the budgeting process, the year the bishop is elected, and then subsequently two people are the only people who review it after that. This eliminates that in the canon and makes diocesan council responsible for reviewing the compensation of all diocesan employees, which is already the case, now including the bishop. That's what it does. This was non-controversial at the hearing. It's on the omnibus, but I wanted to make sure everybody understands it. All right.
All right.
13.
13, again, another omnibus. This one is this clarifying specific roles and authority of standing committee for diocesan property.
In accordance with the Episcopal Church canon, the standing committee makes the final decision on the disposition of all diocesan property. In the past, that's been finance and investment and diocesan council. We actually can't do that. The Episcopal Church canons do not permit that. So this is a change that locates that decision-making in the standing committee, which is where the General Convention canons require it. And this brings our local canons into concert with the national canon to say that standing committee makes property decisions and has to sign off on those. And that's all it does. But that's not a little, but that's what it does. In that, in the past, it was secretary of the diocese and the vice chair of diocesan council can execute deeds, notes, mortgages, and conveyances of property. This makes it a standing committee. Okay. Questions on that?
All right, under 14.
14.
Again, another omnibus resolution. So this removes mandatory layers of governance.
And that is canons that establish, so in our canons for diocesan council counts, there are 4 committees of the diocese. And diocesan council is enabled to create committees should the council decide diocese needs more committees. There are 2 committees that are already created by canon, the Architectural Review Board and the Diocesan School System and Board of Regents, whose positions haven't been filled either partially or at least they've partially been filled when they've been in operation in recent history. So the Charter and Canons Committee proposed that instead of having us continue on in non-compliance with the canons, we eliminate them from the canons, and should diocesan council decide to populate them, the council has the liberty to bring them back into existence. So this eliminates Canon 13 of the Architectural Review Board and Canon 14 of the Diocesan School System and Board of Regents from the canons, so that they aren't mandatory layers of governance. We can convene them if we need them again, but aren't currently constituted in accordance with the canons.
Questions on that one?
That's more bringing the canons into compliance with reality and not trying to bend reality to the canons. 15 is majority, is the
Right, we talked about it first.
Yeah.
Right. change in the voting.
So, as I said at the beginning, this is our project, as in ours, the diocese. These are your canons. So some of these, all of these are proposals from the Charter and Canons Committee that are being shaped by the hearings and by the things that you're saying tonight. And we're going to do this again tomorrow in Jacksonville, and we're going to do this again the next day in Gainesville, and hopefully come to convention with the best of our ideas to propose. And so these are the best that we've done this year, in the year of our Lord 2026. Our goals in the hearing and in these pre-convention meetings are to invite your feedback and hopefully at least have you understand what we're voting on. And then finally, we're trying to stretch our parliamentary muscles again, right? About what it means to consider resolutions, have civil discussion and debate, and ultimately come to decisions about how we want all this to work. So those are our 15 proposals. We did it.
I'll say thanks to Rick Alexander, who's our committee chair, and to Father Wiley for doing major work.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah.
Are there any general questions that we've not covered in the individual report? Do you think? Would you put up slide 61? These are super important. If you're not getting diocesan communications, please get diocesan communications. This is a monthly newsletter that is wrapped in everything Camp Weed. Everything that gets published here gets noted there. And these also, Facebook and Instagram, also receive other things that we push out usually more quickly. So please, if you're not getting diocesan communications, we always try to remind folks that those are there. And then lastly, if you go to the next screen, we look forward to seeing you at convention, the 11th and 12th at Camp Weed in the Cerveny Conference Center. And with that, I'd ask Deacon Melanie to pray us out, dismiss us.
Over here for me.
Oh, sorry.
So it does seem people need to sign up for election buddy training.
Yes, well, that's a great reminder. There are 3 training sessions for Election Buddy that teach you how to use Election Buddy. You do need to make sure that Election Buddy has a couple of different ways to reach you. All of that's in the registration form, but please look at your reminder, which it came out recently from the diocese, reminding you to do Election Buddy training, which is an online Zoom training. And there's several dates for those, several times a day.
It's at the bottom of the most recent reminder about the Election Buddy training. I'll
It's
send it.
there.
I can send it to you.
We'll push it out again. Yeah, we'll push it out by social media too, but it's there, promise. Scout's honor. I was only a Cub Scout. Deacon Melanie.
Since we've been sitting, why don't we stand?
Yes.
No, our backs can take it. No, Claire says I have to come up here. I do have a loud mouth.
You have the blessing of projection.
I have a southern lady's mouth, right?
You don't have a loud mouth, you have the blessing of projection.
Peace of the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Holy and gracious God, we thank you for your church and the blessing to serve within it, even when those nights go long when we are about your business. We thank you for those assembled here and those that aren't. And as we walk in these days ahead towards September 11th, we know that you have called your bishop and you await to reveal that person to us. We ask that you would be with us, that you would be with them, that you would counsel us, Lord, keep us about prayer for your called bishop, for your church. We thank you for your churches in the Diocese of Florida. We thank you for your delegates. We thank you for all of your clergy that you have called and all who will assemble at Camp Weed. We thank you for the ministries that you have placed in the hearts of each one of us.
And we ask that you will send a sense of peace and cooperation and unity as we gather as your assembled people. And Lord, we lift all of this to you this night, these days ahead, at our convention. And we thank you for all that you do and will do for us in the Diocese of Florida. And we thank you for the people that you are bringing us to be. We lift this prayer in your name, our one God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. And for our lovely projection.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. And now, go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.